I turn now to my colleague, Lawrence O'Donnell, with the last word.
Good evening, Alex. We have Senator Elizabeth Warren joining us tonight when we change the subject from defendant Trump, which we'll be discussing with Andrew Weissman, Neil Katyal, and Adam Klasfeld.
Fantastic.
But the big news in this room tonight is that Eddie is back. Eddie Tamborski, our floor manager, the boss of me in this room, is back, and he's been on paternity leave. And Alex, the good news is I haven't heard him say a word about the work we do here or this show. Every single thing he's saying is all about his new baby daughter, Maeve, which is exactly the way it should be. Yes, exactly the way we want it.
Listen, I know that because Eddie's back, that your already beautiful show is going to be that much more perfect. So I can't wait to see the hour.
Eddie's back, but he's not paying attention. Okay, not at all. We're on our own. I have to run this. I have a remote control to run the camera here myself.
I can't wait to see it, Lawrence.
Thank you, Alex.
Have a great show.
Thank you. Well, it happened again. Stormy Daniels quashed Donald Trump. The breaking defendant Trump news of the night is that Stormy Daniels has humiliated Donald Trump once again. And while she was at it, she humiliated his criminal defense lawyers. Tonight, Judge Juan Merchan granted Stormy Daniels' motion to quash a subpoena from Donald Trump, demanding a vast range of information about the making of a documentary film titled Stormy. The judge denied the Trump motion, saying this request is overbroad, seeks general discovery, and is not limited to the subject matter of this case. Judge Merchan had already quashed a subpoena for essentially the same material from NBC Universal, the producer of the documentary. The ruling by Judge Merchan came at the end of a day that began with a hearing about the district attorney's claim that Donald Trump has violated a gag order that prohibits him from, among other things, saying anything about jurors in the case. Prosecutor Christopher Conroy told the judge about a social media post that we reported as breaking news on this program last week. And the prosecutor noted what I noticed about it when we reported it here, that Donald Trump presented it as a quote from Jesse Watters at Fox, but in fact, Donald Trump rewrote what Jesse Watters said and added to that so that it was not actually a quotation of someone else. The district attorney Conroy told the judge, quote, "This is a very troubling post. At 5:46 p.m., the defendant published a post on his Truth Social account that stated they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get on the Trump jury. That whole thing is in quotation marks. It's attributed to somebody named Jesse Watters. What Mr. Watters said was they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge, period." So it is a hybrid of something somebody else said together with something the defendant apparently added on his own. I think the link to the jurors in this case, to this proceeding, I think it's very clearly a violation of your order of April 1st. Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, first tried to defend that post by Donald Trump by saying that it was a repost of what someone else wrote. But Judge Merchan would have none of that. Judge Merchan, it was posted on April 17th at 5:46 p.m., and it says, in quotes, they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get on the Trump jury, closed quote. And then it's attributed to Jesse Watters. Is that, in fact, what Mr. Watters said? Mr. Blanche, he said they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge. And then not at the time, I don't believe he said, in order to get on the Trump jury, Judge Merchan. So your client manipulated what was said and put it in quotes. Am I right, Mr. Blanche? I wouldn't use the word manipulation, Your Honor, but the rest of the quote is not part of the quote. Judge Merchan, okay. My other question is, this is not a repost at all. Mr. Blanche, no. Judge Merchan, no. This is something that was said on TV, and your client had to type it out. He had to sit there, use the quotation marks, the shift key, and type everything out, and then add those additional words. So your argument that these are reposts and therefore they are not a violation, that does not apply to exhibit number 10, is it, Mr. Blanche? Number 10 is not a repost. Agreed. Judge Merchan. So what is your argument as to exhibit 10? Mr. Blanche, Judge, the argument as to exhibit 10, it's ambiguous whether this statement violates the gag order. The gag order says Donald Trump is prohibited from making or directing others to make public statements about any prospective juror or any juror in this criminal proceeding. So Donald Trump cannot make any statement about a juror. No statement at all. That gag order wording could not be more clear. Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer insulted the intelligence of the judge and everyone else in the courtroom when he then said, quote, President Trump is being careful with your honors rules. And the judge interrupted, saying, you, Mr. Blanche, you are losing all credibility. I have to tell you that right now. You are losing all credibility with the court. Now, you can spend years in a courtroom and never hear a judge say anything like that to competent lawyers. Judge Merchan said that he would rule on Donald Trump's violations of the gag order at some point after today's court session. And after Donald Trump left the courthouse, he put in writing a lie that he said when he arrived at the courthouse today, and he spoke to the reporters gathered before he entered the courtroom. The in writing version is more coherent than the loony version that Donald Trump said into the microphone this morning. So we will go with the written version at 4:35 p.m. today. Thousands of people were turned away from the courthouse in Lower Manhattan by steel stanchions and police. That is an absolute lie. I have walked down there several times. Traffic is free flowing in and around the courthouse. Pedestrians, traffic is not hindered in any way. There was a large public gathering area in front of the courthouse where I saw exactly 3 Trump supporters gathered there yesterday. Early reports today said only 1 Trump supporter showed up, while the 85,000 Trump voters in Manhattan completely ignored what was happening at their local courthouse. Absolutely no one has been turned away anywhere in Lower Manhattan. It is actually much easier to approach and stand outside and gaze at Trump's courthouse than it is to see the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree in December, where the crowds and police barricades do indeed actually restrict access. Von Hilliard delivered today's best response to the Trump lie on Twitter, saying, Trump just claimed that the police have shut down the streets around the courthouse for blocks and that his protesters can't be here. Just not true. There is one pro-Trump person here, and the main street along the courthouse is open to traffic. And Von Hilliard, of course, included this video in his Twitter post showing you just how easily vehicles move around and just how much of no one is actually there in support of Donald Trump. The truth is, Trump supporters do not care that Donald Trump is being prosecuted. They've made that very clear. He has begged them to show up, and they have refused. Yesterday, Donald Trump said, America-loving protesters should be allowed to protest at the front steps of courthouses all over the country. So there's Donald Trump summoning Trump supporters in Idaho to go to the courthouse in Boise and stage a big protest for him, or in North Dakota, or in Utah, or Alabama, or Texas, somewhere where there's a vast majority of voters for Donald Trump. Any courthouse in America, Florida, anywhere, and no one anywhere in the country showed up at any courthouse to protest the criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. 74 million Trump voters said absolutely no, we will not protest Donald Trump's criminal prosecution. We do not care. They aren't the only people who don't care. Donald Trump is the only criminal defendant I have ever seen who cannot round up a single family member to sit in the front row of the courtroom in support of criminal defendant Donald Trump. His third and current wife isn't there. Neither of his daughters are there. None of his sons are there. Not a single personal friend has showed up as a show of support for Donald Trump, not one. Serial killer and sometimes cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer had his parents in the courtroom every single day of his criminal trial. Every day. Donald Trump has less familial support than Jeffrey Dahmer had in the courtroom. Leading off our discussion tonight is Adam Klasfeld, who was in the courtroom today and who will be there every day for us at the Trump trial. He's a fellow at Just Security. Also joining us, Andrew Weissmann, former FBI general counsel and former chief of the criminal division in the Eastern District of New York. He is the co-host of the podcast Prosecuting Donald Trump, which just won this year's Webby Award for Best Crime and Justice Podcast. And Neil Katyal is joining us, former acting U.S. Solicitor General, who has argued over 50 cases before the Supreme Court. He's a professor of law at Georgetown Law School and host of the podcast Courtside with Neil Katyal. Neil and Andrew are both MSNBC legal analysts. And Adam, from inside the courtroom today, we've had a chance to read the transcript, and there's some stuff that looks pretty hard-hitting against Todd Blanche with the judge. What's the experience in the courtroom today? What do you gain by being there? What can you add to some of the dramatic exchanges we've seen?
Well, what you could see right off the bat was Blanche's reaction after that devastating line. "You've lost all credibility." It was very after the break. But
in that moment, when he's saying that line about "you've lost all credibility," what can you see with this lawyer?
A tremendous amount of frustration, but at that moment, he is trying to recover. And when the real misery of that takedown really became apparent was after the recess. And we always see, and reporters always remark on it, how Trump is glowering when he enters the courtroom, glowering when he leaves the courtroom. And this time he was upstaged by his lawyer on the misery quotient. It was very evident when he was walking in. And it was because it was about more than that one moment, Lawrence. This was, as your introduction illustrated, a drumbeat. There were other moments throughout that oral argument. I'm just going to read a couple ones. This one is very representative. He was asked directly if he had any case law to support his proposition. And so the judge asks him, "So tell me, what case law do you have to support that?" Blanche: "I don't have any case law to support that, but it's just common sense, Your Honor." How can it be that President Trump is prohibited from violating the gag order through his words or casting another person to say something that he was saying? The judge interrupts, "All right," which is a big difference under the First Amendment of the Constitution. The lawyer goes on, "All right, where does it say that? Give me the case law." Blanche: "Your Honor, there is none." So this was just one kind of representative exchange, and this was a brutal and even one could say bloody argument that led to that devastating line. And we're on day 2 of the trial. It is very difficult for a lawyer to be told that they have lost all credibility in the courtroom on the second day of what's expected to be an at least 6-week trial.
So, Andrew, Donald Trump is at home tonight thinking about that and wondering, can I use that as an excuse where I fire Todd Blanche and the defense team because the judge has, says they have no credibility? And do I then stop the trial by firing my lawyers?
No.
Okay.
So the criminal law has figured that out.
Yeah.
Every defendant it'd be like Scheherazade. You would constantly be firing your lawyer and never going to trial. Yeah. And the way it works in a criminal case, which is not true in a civil case, once you are in the case, you file what's called a notice of appearance. Mm-hmm. You are now the lawyer of record, and there could be more than one. Here, there actually are 3. You then, to get off that case, the judge has to do it. The client can't just say, "This is not my lawyer." The lawyer can't just say, "I'm off the case." Once you file that notice of appearance in a criminal case, you're in until the judge says otherwise. Here, I mean, first of all, the argument is going to be Todd Blanche is doing his client's bidding. I mean, he doesn't have a judge problem. He has a client problem. Yeah. And what he's not doing is, what it appears is, you know, when you're a lawyer in a case, you may have clients on both sides, whether it's the prosecutor or the defense. You're an officer of the court first. And so what the judge is saying, you're an officer of the court. When I ask you a question, you have to be candid. It is both the right thing to do and it's strategically the right thing to do. So, I mean, what we're seeing play out is a client problem.
Neil, I want to read you a point that Judge Merchan made where he referred to the possibility of being overturned on appeal on this issue of contempt of court by Donald Trump. He says, the fact that the people did not come running in here immediately when your client started reposting things, or that the court did not decide to summarily find your client in contempt, a decision that probably would have been overturned on appeal, is not probative of anything. You said, you know, maybe we've gotten too close to the line. I think that you should have done, what you should have done is probably said, you know, my client is thinking of reposting some things. It's not really clear to us in the gag order whether that's allowed. Judge Merchan, is that allowed? But that's not what you did. Neil, I want to go back to that phrase where he said a decision probably would have been overturned on appeal. So that's his response to certainly some comment that's been out there asking why isn't the judge acting more swiftly, and the term he used, summarily, in reaction to some of these things that Donald Trump has done.
Yeah, the way I read that is Trump is scared that this gag order, that he's flagrantly violated it, and the penalty for flagrantly violating it is not just the $1,000 fine that the district attorney asked here, but the possibility of 30 days of time in jail. And so at every turn, the Trump team is trying to remind the judge, look, if you do something like that, if you actually seek real sanctions in terms of jail time, we're going to try and take an immediate appeal. That's how I understand that word salad, because it's a little hard to comprehend. But I do think that just reading the transcript, that they've made a little headway on that point. I think the judge is worried that if he does impose a jail time on Donald Trump, that it'll lead to an immediate appeal and it may be reversed on appeal. That, I think, is his concern. I think the other concern is that the jury's already been impaneled at this point. And even though if this were any other defendant, Lawrence, who flagrantly violated gag orders like this, they'd be jailed. I think the concern here is the jury's been impaneled. What are you going to do? Keep the jury, sequestered and so on for day after day while Trump serves his other sentence? You could also just have him, jailed at night, I guess, but that might interfere with his ability to prepare for trial. So it's all a kind of mess. I think the best thing to do is for the judge to issue a jail sentence now, but to suspend it and to say to Donald Trump, look, you flagrantly violated this. Every other person would go to jail. For you, what I'm going to do is wait until the end of the criminal trial. And if at the end of the trial you behave and don't act like a toddler and comply with the gag order, then I'll consider not having you have to serve this sentence. I think that's a way to straddle all of these different competing concerns. What I don't think should be done is just give a $1,000 penalty to Donald Trump for such flagrant violations. I mean, $1,000 might be a lot to him. I don't know that he has any money. It's always unclear, but it's still a slap on the wrist compared to the kind of conduct he's engaged in here.
Andrew, an awful lot of criminal defendants in that courtroom are living on Rikers Island in jail while they're on trial. It's where they spend the night every night. It's where they spend the night awaiting trial. Yep. So there's no logistical struggle with that in theory. But the judge knows that anything he would issue there would be appealed. How does that appeal process interact with the trial process?
It shouldn't affect it at all. So I think Neil's idea is a good one. It has this sort of interim effect of sort of this sort of Damocles hanging over your head. The other thing he can do is he can say, even though there's Truth Socials and there's direct media, he could say with respect to the Truth Socials, there's going to be a monitor. You're not going to have access. And he could say, Susan Necklace, you are now responsible for it. So there are interim steps that he can take short of just saying, here's a $1,000 fine, which really isn't going to do enough, because he really does have to do something. On the other hand, Donald Trump desperately wants the story to be he was jailed, because, what happened today was David Pecker revealed that this was an entire scheme about fake news. I mean, this was just went so to the heart of everything he was saying is really with him. And so he just does not want the story in the trial to be the facts that are coming out. So, it's a difficult issue.
We're coming right back to those facts after we squeeze in a break here. Everyone's going to stay with us. We're going to get back to the evidence of the case that was heard today. We'll be right back. Here is how the first witness, David Pecker, then the head of the National Enquirer, described Donald Trump today. Prosecutor, how would you describe him as a businessman, David Pecker? I would describe Mr. Trump as very knowledgeable. I would describe him as a very detail-oriented. I would describe him as almost as a micromanager. From what I saw, that he looked at all of the aspects of whatever the issue was. Andrew Weissman, Neil Katyal, Adam Klasfeld back with us. And Andrew, the defense is going to be, he's not a micromanager. He doesn't know who's putting what memos on what checks. He's just not a micromanager.
Yes, this is the standard defense when you have a leader on trial and the mechanics of the crime are done by underlings. It's the defense in an organized crime case. I was not the shooter. I was not on scene. It's the defense when it's Jeff Skilling and Ken Lay saying, I didn't know what the paperwork was. It is a standard argument that is made. Of course, it doesn't help that this is a small family business. We are not talking about Enron. We are not even talking about an organized crime family, although there's some analogies that could be made. But in terms of size, it's small. This is a very small unit. So the idea that he couldn't possibly know is going to be a difficult one, given how small the group is. But having testimony from a longtime friend who is saying positive things about him, that he is a micromanager, is really good evidence for your start-off witness if you're the government.
And Neil Katyal, they're starting with Mr. Pecker apparently to bring in someone who can give the widest frame of a kind of a shot, a description of the size of the scheme involved of protecting Trump, of which Stormy Daniels was one piece.
Yeah, and before answering that, I just want to return to Andrew's point about the mob boss defense, because even when it may work in some cases, here I think the real problem with it is that Donald Trump directed his lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid the $130,000 and took out a home equity loan, Lawrence, on his house to do so. It's hard to say that's Michael Cohen's independent, judgment to go and take out a home equity loan on his own house, as opposed to what Donald Trump told him to do. That's one problem. The other is they've lordy their tapes. They have, Michael Cohen and Donald Trump talking, in which Donald Trump is ordering Cohen to basically pay off Karen McDougal. So I think those are what make those two things hard. With respect to Pecker, I would say, look, unfortunately for the defense, it looks like the one time that David Pecker isn't willing to make up stories to protect Donald Trump is when he's testifying under penalty of perjury. And that's what happened today, is that he basically put the knife into Trump. He's saying, look, Trump and I had this deal, and it's chronological. It starts even before, it starts in 2015. And it describes not just what he talked about yesterday, checkbook journalism, and not just catch and kill, but basically that the National Enquirer had become an appendage of the Trump campaign. And they were, for example, making up stories about Ted Cruz and morphing images and all sorts of stuff. And our campaign finance laws, Lawrence, are written to ensure transparency, so that if you're getting some sort of gift, whether it's dollars or an in-kind donation, that's disclosed to the voters so that they can make up their mind. And what this entire scheme was, start to finish, was a way for Donald Trump to get a bunch of benefits from a journalistic organization without disclosing that to the American people. That's a crime every day of the week.
Adam, was there any way to read the jury today and how David Pecker's testimony was landing?
They were very attentive. I'll give you a flash moment. There was a moment where David Pecker was describing a time when Michael Cohen wanted to shift to Signal Communications, Signal, the encrypted messaging app. And David Pecker is new to this app. He is learning it, and he is describing the disappearing messages feature where messages are, in his words, destroyed. The jurors were spotted smiling at that line, and it goes to the cover-up. That's what this is about. And so that was an illustration. They're following along. And to some of the points that were made by both Neil and Andrew earlier, not only was it apparent that Trump could have known, according to Pecker's testimony, he was in the loop from the get-go, from the August 2015 Trump Tower meeting, and there was this full narration of it, and there was rapt attention to it. He is explaining it in the same terms that the prosecution gave during opening statements yesterday, this three-pronged scheme. And I have it in front of me right now, saying, at that meeting, Donald Trump and Michael, they asked me what I could do and what my magazines could do to help the campaign. So thinking about it, as I did previously, I said what I would do is I would run or publish positive stories about Mr. Trump, and I would publish negative stories about his opponents. And I would be the eyes and ears, he said later, of the campaign, just as the prosecution promised on day one. So it's no wonder why the jury was being so attentive.
So, Andrew, we got a serious problem for the defense theory on day one, since the defense argument is going to have to be Donald Trump, to whatever extent he ever tried to suppress stories like Stormy Daniels, it was to protect Melania. It was to protect his sheltered daughters from the harsh accusations that can be made against great men like Donald Trump. It was all about protecting them. You have David Pecker saying this was about the campaign. Yeah. It was a campaign meeting that we went to where we said, this is what we'll do for the campaign. He is leaving absolutely no doubt that campaign was the entire motivation for everything he talked about.
So this is one where when you are at the prosecution, sometimes what you want is for the defense to trot out a theory that is blatantly ridiculous. So that is going to be a terrible argument based on what we understand the proof is. If they go down that road of trying to say, I'm just concerned about my wife. So first of all, he's cheating right, left, and center. So, to suddenly say I was concerned about my wife, it falls a little bit on deaf ears, but that's not the evidence, including there'll be this evidence that said, can we avoid paying right now because let's do it after the election because I don't really care what comes out after the election, meaning it doesn't matter that Melania knows. So I think that's the kind of thing that could just spectacularly backfire. I predict on cross, because you're always thinking what there could be. This is the kind of cross where you basically just point out what he doesn't know. To say, you weren't there when the false business records were signed. You don't know how they were created. I mean, you just go with sort of very clear things that just to point out the limits of his knowledge. But that's not, if you have a smart jury, that's not much of a cross, but it gives you something to do that points out his limits. But this is a dangerous person to cross because he knows him so well. And to the extent, as Neil said, he sort of put the knife in him now. If they do a hostile cross, it could get worse.
Yeah, and Neil, as we sit here trying to think of defense angles, and as I said on Monday, it's the first time we ever heard anything from the defense. That opening statement was the very first time that we heard anything from the defense. It turns out they haven't come up with something that we didn't think of. There's not some interesting defense angle that makes us sit back and go, oh, okay, let's see how that plays out. Didn't think of that.
Yeah, no, Lawrence, it turns out when you commit a blatant crime, it's kind of hard to come up with a defense. And, it may be fine to do it in the court of public opinion and, with all your PR spin and so on outside of the courtroom, but inside the courtroom with regular evidence and so on and a regular procedure to get to the bottom and the truth, it's very hard. And Andrew's point just a moment ago is a perfect illustration of it. Trump will try and run the so-called John Edwards defense of I was trying to protect my family. The problem is that the evidence blows that out of the water, and the jury's going to get to hear that evidence. And so, I think Trump's best strategy here is a kind of spaghetti at the wall strategy of throw anything to cause any one juror to have reasonable doubt. Because if one juror says Trump didn't do it, then it's a hung jury and you can't send him to jail.
Adam, any indication when we will get the judge's ruling on the violations of the gag order?
No indication yet. All that he said is that he would reserve decision. And I think that really kind of speaks to the deliberative way the judge is handling this. And again, it kind of goes to the tenor of the arguments with Todd Blanche, where the judge was very much dissecting the timeline of every tweet. When did Michael Cohen post something? When did Trump post something? So, and so it shows that if Trump is angling for something, the judge is going to steer it on his own time.
Tomorrow would be good for us. Since there's no trial scheduled for tomorrow, we'd be happy to cover it. Adam Klasfeld, Andrew Weissman, Neil Katyal, thank you all very much for joining us in this discussion tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up, Joe Biden is now putting pressure on Donald Trump in Florida, where a Republican abortion ban goes into effect next week. The president was in Florida today. Senator Elizabeth Warren says voters in every state should be concerned about abortion bans. Senator Warren joins us next. Today, President Biden campaigned in Florida, where next week, Governor Ron DeSantis' abortion ban goes into effect.
For 50 years, the court ruled that there was a fundamental constitutional right to privacy. But 2 years ago, that was taken away. Let's be real clear. There's one person responsible for this nightmare, and he's acknowledged and he brags about it, Donald Trump. Trump bragged how proud he was to get rid of Roe v. Wade over it. He took credit for it. He said there has to be punishment for women exercising their reproductive freedom. His words, not mine. He described the Dobbs decision as a miracle. Maybe it's coming from that Bible he's trying to sell. Whoa. I almost wanted to buy one just to see what the hell's in it. Folks, it was no miracle. It was a political deal to get rid of Roe v. Wade. A deal. Political deal he made with the evangelical base of the Republican Party to look past his moral, if they look past his moral and character flaws in exchange for his commitment to appoint justice to the Supreme Court who would overturn Roe. Don't think he's making a deal right now with MAGA extremists to ban nationwide abortion in every single state, because he's making it. If Congress ever passes a ban, I will veto that ban. Elected Democratic Congress, Kamala and I will make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again.
In November, a Florida ballot initiative will give voters the opportunity to protect abortion access in the state constitution.
All over this country, from Ohio, Kansas, Michigan, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Virginia, women and men in every background voted to record numbers to protect, in record numbers, to protect reproductive freedom. This November, you can add Florida to that list. You can. Are you ready to do that? You got to show up and vote. Are you ready to protect freedom? It was Donald Trump who ripped away the rights of freedom of women in America. It'll be all of us who restore those rights for women in America. And when you do that, we'll teach Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women of America.
Later, President Biden met with a local organization where he said this.
I think Florida's in play nationally. This election is a basic old-fashioned election. It's about getting out the votes. It's about putting together campaigns the old-fashioned way. Not that we don't use all the technology available, but just everything from knocking on doors to putting up road signs, to make sure that we get people to the polls, all those things.
And a union worker thanked President Biden for saving his pension.
The only reason I have a pension is because of you.
Well, we did get that done.
Yes, now is Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. She is a candidate for re-election this year, along with President Biden. Senator, there's the president in Florida today. He's covering, obviously, the abortion issue in that state and the ban that's going to be in effect there, and the Florida women have to live under. What is the sense in states like Massachusetts where it appears that rights like this are safe?
Look, rights nowhere in America are safe if Donald Trump retakes the White House. And the Republicans have made that clear. The extremist wing of the Republican Party owns that party, and they have made clear they will go for a nationwide abortion ban. And right now, the Heritage Foundation is actually laying out plans so that even if they don't have control of the House and Senate, how it is that if they can get Donald Trump into the White House, they will be able to effectively outlaw abortion all across this country. You know, next week, we're going to see in Florida this extreme abortion ban go into effect. And the president said it right. There is exactly one person who is ultimately responsible for that, and it is Donald Trump, who has bragged about the extremist Supreme Court he put in place to remove Roe versus Wade. And now we're just watching chapter after chapter after chapter of how the extremists are coming for abortion rights, not just in red states, but in red states, blue states, purple states, every state.
Do the Democrats believe that this changes possibilities in Florida beyond just that ballot measure?
You know, look, I think it's clear that Democrats can win Florida. Abortion will be on the ballot. It's going to be on the ballot in all 50 states. And Florida is going to see it front and center with a specific abortion ballot initiative. This is about as clear as it gets in the comparison. Donald Trump is the guy who put in place the extremist Supreme Court specifically for the purpose of overturning Roe versus Wade. And you heard it from Joe Biden himself. Give him a chance, give the Democrats control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we will make Roe versus Wade law of the land again. You can't ask for a difference bigger than that.
A man said to Joe Biden in Florida today, the only reason I have a pension is because of you. He got cheers for that. And it's one of those items that most voters don't even know about.
Yeah. You know, this one is about some legislation that we got through shortly after Joe Biden got into office to be able to protect people's pensions that had been hollowed out back during the 2008 crisis. And I want to add, he actually did another thing for pensions today, or for retirement funds. And that is, it won't get a lot of attention, won't get big headlines, but the fiduciary rule has gone into place. The Labor Department, Julie Su, who is the acting Secretary of Labor, announced a rule that says basically your investment advisor has to work in your best interests, not take money from insurance companies and others in order to put you into financial products that are not in your best interest. That's something that over time may never get a headline, but it's going to mean that a whole lot of people in this country, when they hit their retirement years, are a lot safer because of Joe Biden and his administration.
Senator, I've been saying for years, especially in years past that now seem in the distant, our distant history, where it didn't seem to many voters to make that much difference who they voted for in a presidential election, that there was always the Supreme Court. There's always the Supreme Court. There's always going to be a difference between George W. Bush's choice for the Supreme Court and Al Gore's choice for the Supreme Court. And we've seen that George W. Bush's choice wrote the opinion overturning Roe versus Wade. Has that finally penetrated on the Democratic side of the electorate?
Oh, I think so. I think people have come to understand that so much of what we counted on for a very long time, and that was the security, the independence of our courts, that our courts would not be political, and that our courts were fundamentally about protecting our rights, not about hollowing out those rights, or in the case of Roe versus Wade, actually taking them away. And the Republicans for a long time have been on the attack. They understand the importance of extremist courts, and they have pushed in that direction. They built the Federalist Society around that whole idea. And I got to say, Democrats just didn't tumble to it nearly as early. But we may wake up late, but we are fully awake now. And we understand what's on the ballot come November 2024. We need Joe Biden in the White House because of the good things he's going to do, but we also need him there because we simply cannot count on the United States Supreme Court to protect us as we once did. We have to have Joe Biden in the White House, Democrats in the House and in the Senate, so that we can actually deliver on Roe versus Wade, on voting rights, on the right to join a union, on protecting people with gun safety, on climate, on so many things that touch each of us individually every day. This election in November is absolutely crucial, and we're awake and ready to fight for it.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, running for re-election in Massachusetts, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with the bad news for Donald Trump from tonight's Pennsylvania presidential primary results. It's election night in Pennsylvania, and with 82% of the vote in, as usual, Joe Biden has the highest winning percentage at 92% of the vote, and Donald Trump has 84% of the vote. Nikki Haley has about 17% of the vote. Now, Pennsylvania is a closed primary state, meaning only registered Republicans can vote in that primary. Every one of those Nikki Haley voters in Pennsylvania knows Nikki Haley is no longer a candidate for president, but they just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump. Tonight, the United States Senate gave final approval to a $95.3 billion package, which includes aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. President Biden just released a statement that reads, in part, "I will sign this bill into law and address the American people as soon as it reaches my desk tomorrow, so we can begin sending weapons and equipment to Ukraine this week." We'll be right back. That is tonight's last word.